2 years ago, I went on a business trip to a city I'd never been to before. The company had booked a hotel for me in the city center. It was a modern-looking place, pretty fancy on the inside, but a bit smaller than most hotels, with only 3 stories and about 30 to 40 rooms. After checking in, I got my key for a room on the top floor and headed to the elevator with my luggage. As I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor and stepped into the quiet hallway, I felt a little uneasy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something just felt off. I reached my room, put down my bags, and pulled out my key. Just as I was about to open the door to the neighboring room suddenly opened, and a man stepped into the hallway. His sudden appearance startled me a bit, but I just nodded at him and went into my room. The room was nice and comfy, with all the modern amenities. I unpacked a bit, then lay on the bed to watch some TV. I was exhausted from the long flight, so I decided to call it an early night. After a quick shower, I turned off all the lights and got into bed. Just as I was drifting off, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. The footsteps got closer and eventually stopped right outside my door. Through the sliver of light under the door, I saw a shadow pause for a moment, then slowly move away down the hall. The whole situation gave me the creeps, but I double-checked that my door was locked and tried to get some sleep. The next day, I went to the office to meet my colleagues and attend a meeting. After the meeting, we had dinner together, and I didn't get back to the hotel until around 10 p.m. I was dead tired and looking forward to a shower and some rest. In the bathroom, the warm water felt great, washing away the day's fatigue. But then and so at Las Vegas, I heard the unmistakable beep of the electronic door lock. My heart raced. It was too late for housekeeping. So who could it be? I quickly turned off the shower and listened intently. I heard the door open slowly and then close, followed by footsteps moving around the room. My pulse quickened. I had no idea who was in my room or what they wanted. I quietly put on the pants I had left on the floor, making sure not to make any noise, and pressed my ear to the bathroom door. I could hear someone rummaging through my bags. They knew I was in the bathroom, which made it even more terrifying. I was frozen with fear, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I decided to make a loud noise to scare them off. I banged on the bathroom door as hard as I could, yelling for help. I heard the intruders' frantic footsteps as they bolted out of the room. After a few seconds of silence, I carefully stepped out, locked the door, and grabbed my phone to call 911. I then called the front desk to let them know what had happened. The police and hotel staff arrived quickly, but the intruder had already vanished. The police later told me they found the guy sitting in his car in the hotel parking lot. He didn't seem to be planning to leave. They took him into custody, but without clear evidence of harmful intent. He might not face serious charges. The next few nights at the hotel were restless. I kept worrying that the man might come back. The police and hotel had beefed up security, but the fear lingered. I started second-guessing my choice of hotel. Since that incident, I've become super cautious about my hotel choices. On every business trip, I thoroughly check the hotel's security features and prefer well-reviewed chain hotels. I've also learned to be more vigilant and not ignore any strange details during my stay. Even though this happened a while ago, the memory of that night is still fresh. Every time I walk into a hotel room, I remember that eerie night, take a deep breath, and remind myself to stay alert. That experience, as terrifying as it was, I once had a terrifying experience during a business trip while staying at a hotel, and it was the most frightening night of my life. At the time, I was attending a two-day business conference in an unfamiliar city. I had booked a nearby budget hotel, which was conveniently located not far from the conference venue. On the night of my arrival, despite feeling exhausted, I tried to push through my fatigue and prepare for the meeting scheduled for the next day. In the middle of the night, I was abruptly awakened by a series of knocking on my door. Checking my phone, I discovered it was already 2 in the morning. Feeling uneasy, as I hadn't arranged for anyone to visit me, especially not at such a late hour. I cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. However, I couldn't see anyone outside. The knocking persisted for a few minutes before suddenly ceasing. After hesitating for a moment, I decided to return to bed. attempting to ignore the strange occurrence and quickly fall back asleep. But just as I had settled down, I heard a blood-curdling scream echoing from somewhere downstairs. The sound was filled with despair and panic. My heart raced, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me, rendering me momentarily paralyzed. I swiftly got up, determined to investigate what was happening. Dressing quickly, I opened the door and stepped out into the dimly lit corridor. However, a slight instant at the end of the hallway, I saw a shadowy figure, seemingly moving closer toward me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I was overcome by an overwhelming sense of dread. The figure suddenly vanished, but the ominous feeling lingered. I instinctively quickened my pace, making my way straight to the staircase. Hastening downstairs, the screams grew louder and more distinct, compelling me to locate their source as soon as possible. Upon reaching the lobby, I discovered a group of people gathered around a figure lying on the ground. As I approached, I realized the person was covered in blood and groaning in pain. Though feeling nauseated, I knew I had to act quickly to assist them. I immediately dialed emergency services and, together with others, moved the injured individual to a safe area, awaiting the arrival of medical assistance. A sense of palpable fear gripped me as I realized how close I had come to being a witness to the terrifying events unfolding before me. The medical team arrived promptly and transported the injured person to the hospital for treatment. Law enforcement officers also arrived on the scene to conduct an investigation. After being questioned, I was allowed to return to my room, but I found it impossible to shake off the sense of unease that plagued me, making sleep elusive. The following morning, I hastily checked out of the hotel, overwhelmed by the fear and anxiety brought on by the harrowing experience of the previous night. I couldn't shake off the memories of what had transpired and how narrowly I had avoided becoming directly involved. This experience served as a stark reminder that even in seemingly safe environment, unforeseen events can occur. When I was in my early 30s, I worked the night shift as a security guard at a luxury hotel in San Francisco. The job paid well, but the erratic schedule in dealing with the staff could be a headache. Night shifts were especially tough, lineal, and often eerie. As the sun set, I'd put on my uniform and get ready for a long night of patrolling and monitoring. It was a typical summer night, close to midnight. Most of the guests were asleep, and the lobby was quiet, with only the soft glow from the front desk lights. I was chatting with my colleague, Amy, trying to pass the time. Out of nowhere, the phone at the front desk rang, breaking the silence. Amy picked it up and her face suddenly turned serious. She put down the phone and told me that a guest in room 713 had called, saying they heard strange noises coming from the room next door. My heart skipped a beat. Room 714 was booked tonight. I decided to check it out myself. As I headed to the elevator, a sense of unease washed over me. The elevator slowly ascended, and my mind raced with possibilities. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the 7th floor hallway. It was eerily quiet, with only my footsteps echoing. I walked up to room 713 and knocked. A middle-aged man answered, looking worried. He told me he had heard thuds and whispers coming from room 714. I thanked him and moved to the next door. Standing outside room 714, I felt a strange atmosphere. The door was shut tight with no light coming from inside. Taking a deep breath, I used my keycard to unlock it. A blast of cold air hit me as I opened the door, and the room was pitch black. I turned on my flashlight, scanning the room. Everything seemed in place. Nothing out of the ordinary. I checked every corner, under the bed, and inside the wardrobe, but found nothing. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a low sound behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight towards the noise, but saw nothing. The room was empty, as if the sound had been my imagination. Feeling a chill down my spine, I hurried back to the front desk to tell Amy what had happened. She looked nervous too. We decided to check the surveillance footage. In the security room, I pulled up the footage from the 7th floor. The hallway was empty until I showed up. I watched myself knock on room 713 and then move to room 714. But when I opened the door, the screen flickered and went blurry for a few seconds before returning to normal. This made me even more uneasy. While we were still reviewing the footage, the phone rang again. Amy answered it, and her face turned pale. The guest in room 713 had called back, saying they heard noises from room 714 again. This time, I brought along Jack, another security guard with more experience. We headed up to the 7th floor together. Walking down the hallway, I felt an oppressive atmosphere hanging in the air. At room 714, I unlocked the door again. The room was just as dark as before. We turned on our flashlights and began a thorough search. Suddenly, Jack stopped and pointed to a corner of the room. There were faint markings on the wall, like symbols. They looked like they were drawn with some kind of red liquid that had dried. I examined them closely. They were intricate and strange, resembling some kind of ancient script. Jack said he had never seen anything like them before. As we were trying to make sense of the symbols, a whispering sound filled the room, clearer this time, like someone was speaking right into our ears. We looked around, trying to locate the source, but the room was empty. We decided to report this to the manager. Our shift manager, John, listened to our report with a serious expression. He said he had informed the higher-ups and told us to stay alert and report any more strange occurrences. That night we kept a close watch, but room 714 stayed silent. The next day the hotel management decided to temporarily close the room for a thorough inspection and cleaning. They also brought in a professional investigator to look into the strange symbol. The investigator found the symbols but couldn't explain their meaning. He used all sorts of equipment to check for hidden cameras or listening devices but found nothing. With no clear answers, the hotel eventually reopened the room. Months passed, and the hotel returned to its usual rhythm. Room 714 was open again, but the weird stories about it spread among the staff. The guest from that night was never found, and the mysterious event became a legend among the employees' spooky chapter in the hotel's history. Even after I left the job, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling from that night. I often thought about the strange call and those whispers. I started researching ancient languages and symbols, trying to find any clues. One day, I came across a book on ancient mysticism that had symbols similar to what I'd seen. They were said to be part of some old ritual, possibly for summoning or binding something. I shared my findings with the investigator, who was intrigued and said he'd look further into it. Though we might never solve the mystery, I felt a bit closer to understanding what might have happened. To this day, whenever I pass by that hotel in San Francisco, I can't help but look up at the tall building, wondering about the secrets it holds. Maybe one day we'll uncover the truth, but until then, that night remains a haunting memory, a reminder that some things in this world are beyond our understanding.